Sorry, Tanya, I didn't mean for this to happen. Devin and I.
We
can't ignore what we feel anymore. We have to tell you before you walk down that aisle.
Tanya felt the world tilt, her vision blurred. The beautiful dress suddenly felt like a prison. Tanya caught her reflection in the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. The white wedding dress looked perfect on her body, but her eyes told a different story. They looked almost afraid. She pressed her palm against the cool glass of the window on the 34th floor of the Plaza Hotel and stared down at the streets of Manhattan below. Somewhere down there, 200 guests were waiting. Somewhere down there was her future. But in this bridal suite, all she could hear was her sister's laughter echoing from the hallway. And something about that sound made her stomach twist in a way she couldn't explain. Sister. Her sister. The woman who'd promised to be her maid of honor. The woman she'd confided in about every fear, every dream, every secret wish about her future with Devin. 20 minutes until she walked down the aisle. 20 minutes until her whole world would change, but not in the way she thought. The hotel phone rang. Tanya stared at it like it might explode. Her best friend, Keisha, answered. Her face went completely pale. "Tanya, you need to come to the hallway. Right now," Keisha whispered, her voice shaking. Tanya would never forget what she saw when she stepped into that hallway. Her sister, Brittany, stood there with tears streaming down her face, grabbing Devin's arm like she was holding on for dear life. And Devin, the man Tanya was supposed to marry in 20 minutes, was looking at her sister the way he was supposed to look at Tanya. The way a man looks at someone he just realized he loved. "I'm so sorry, Tanya," Brittany cried out, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Devin and I, we can't ignore what we feel anymore. We have to tell you before you walk down that aisle." Tanya felt the world tilt, her vision blurred. The beautiful dress suddenly felt like a prison. "We've been together for 3 months, Devin said quietly, and those words hit Tanya harder than any physical blow ever could. "I tried to end it. I tried to stay faithful to you. But Tanya, I'm in love with her. I'm so sorry." This was the moment that would shatter Tanya Richardson into 1,000 pieces. This was the moment she didn't know would eventually lead her to the man who would put her back together. Before we begin, you need to subscribe to this channel right now because what happens in this story will shock you. This is the story of betrayal, survival, and an unexpected love that would change everything 10 years later. Are you ready? Let's begin. 5 years before the wedding. The coffee shop on Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan smelled like cinnamon and hope. At least that's what Tanya thought as she sat across from Devin Wilson, watching him smile at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. Tanya worked as a graphic designer at a mid-size marketing firm in Manhattan. She made decent money, enough to afford her small apartment in Washington Heights, enough to feel independent, enough to feel like she was building something real. She was 28 years old, ambitious, and she just started working on freelance projects on the side. Devin was 30 years old. He worked in finance at a company called Vertex Capital Partners. He made excellent money, the kind of money that allowed him to live in a luxury apartment in Chelsea, drive a nice car, and take women to expensive restaurants without checking the price tag. But here's the thing about Devin. He came from money, old money. His family had been wealthy for generations. His father had died when he was young, leaving behind a substantial trust fund. His mother was a socialite. His older brother, Alexander, was even wealthier, a self-made billionaire who'd started his own tech company and sold it for an ungodly amount of money. Devin had always lived in his brother's shadow. Alexander was the genius. Alexander was the success story. Alexander was the one who'd actually built something from scratch and become a billionaire before he turned 35. Devin, on the other hand, was just rich. He had the money, but he didn't have the accomplishment. He didn't have the respect. He didn't have the legacy. What he did have was charm, and he used it on Tanya from the moment they met at a friend's barbecue in Prospect Park. "You're staring at the water like it owes you money," he said, appearing beside her with 2 drinks in his hands. Tanya turned, surprised, and found herself looking at one of the most handsome men she'd ever seen. Dark skin, perfect teeth, expensive cologne, and eyes that made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. "I'm just thinking," she said, accepting the drink. "The city's so beautiful, but most people rush through it without noticing." "Then they're stupid," Devin said simply. "I'm Devin, by the way." "Tanya." They talked for the next 3 hours, about growing up in New York, about their families, about dreams and disappointments. Devin told her about his father and how he died when Devin was only 14. He told her about his mother and how she'd basically disappeared into the social scene to cope with the grief. He told her about his brother Alexander and how much he admired him, even though they weren't that close. "He's in San Francisco mostly," Devin explained, "building his empire. We talk on the phone sometimes, but I don't know. There's a distance there. I think he thinks I'm just a trust fund kid who's never worked a day in his life." "Are you?" Tanya asked, and then immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry that was." "It's okay," Devin said, laughing. "Honestly, yeah, kind of. My job is basically just sitting in meetings and moving money around. It's not like I'm actually building anything. But my brother won't let me invest in his company, and when I've tried to start my own ventures, they've all failed. So I just exist. I collect a paycheck. I date women. I go to parties. It's not a bad life, but it's not a meaningful one." Tanya felt sympathy for him. Here was this gorgeous, wealthy man who clearly felt lost and unaccomplished. She wanted to help him find his purpose. What she didn't know was that Devin was an excellent liar. Tanya's sister, Brittany, was 4 years younger. She was beautiful in the way that came naturally, without trying, without caring too much. Where Tanya was ambitious and focused, Brittany was scattered and impulsive. Their father had died when they were young. Their mother, Patricia, was a nurse who worked double shifts to keep the family afloat. Tanya had learned early to take care of herself and her sister. That meant doing homework, making dinner, helping with applications, giving advice, and constantly worrying about whether Brittany was okay. Brittany had dropped out of college twice. She worked retail at a clothing boutique in Soho. She was always broke. She was always asking for money. She was always complaining that life wasn't fair, that Tanya got all the luck, that nothing ever worked out for her. 1 month after Tanya met Devin, she brought him to a family dinner at their mother's apartment in Queens. Patricia was immediately charmed. She told Tanya later that Devin was a keeper, that he had good manners, that he seemed to really care about you. Brittany, on the other hand, was quiet. She watched Devin from across the dinner table with an expression that Tanya couldn't quite read. Later, when they were cleaning up dishes, Brittany pulled Tanya aside. "He's hot," Brittany said simply. "Thanks," Tanya laughed. "I think so too." "You better hold on to him," Brittany said, and there was something odd in her voice, something almost like a warning. Tanya didn't think much about it at the time. 6 months of dating Devin was like living in a dream. He was attentive. He was romantic. He remembered the little things. He called her every morning and every night. He sent flowers for no reason. He took her to nice restaurants, to Broadway shows, to weekend trips upstate. After 9 months, he took her to Cote Restaurant in Manhattan and got down on one knee. "Tanya, I know this is fast," he said, pulling out a 2-carat diamond ring. "But I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I want to spend forever with you. Will you marry me?" She said yes immediately. She was crying. She was happy. She felt like her life was finally becoming the fairy tale she'd always wanted. The wedding planning began. Tanya wanted something elegant but not pretentious. She chose the Plaza Hotel. She chose June for the date. She hired a photographer, a caterer, a florist. She registered at Bloomingdale's. She bought a dress that made her feel beautiful. And she asked Brittany to be her maid of honor. "Really?" Brittany asked, tears in her eyes. "You want me to be your maid of honor?" "Of course," Tanya said. "You're my sister, and I need your support with all of this planning." Brittany hugged her, and Tanya felt her sister's body shake with emotion. What Tanya didn't know was that Brittany was already in love with Devin. The affair, though calling it that was generous, began innocently enough. Tanya was busy with work. She'd gotten a huge freelance project that required her to work 60-hour weeks. She was designing an entire branding campaign for a Fortune 500 company, and it was the biggest opportunity of her career. Devin, being supportive, started spending time with Brittany to help with wedding planning details. "I'll take her to look at centerpieces," he told Tanya one evening. "You focus on your work. I want you to not stress about this wedding. Let me and Brittany handle some of the details." It seemed sweet. It seemed supportive. It seemed like the kind of thing a caring fiancé would do. What it actually was, an opportunity. Devin had always felt inadequate compared to his brother. Always felt like he wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't successful enough. He had money, but money was easy for him. It didn't mean anything. What Devin wanted was to feel powerful, and the way he found power was through taking things that were important to other people. Tanya was happy. Tanya had a successful career. Tanya had a purpose. So the way Devin found power was by taking the one thing that was supposed to be hers, her wedding, her future, her happiness. And Brittany, who'd spent her whole life feeling less than, who'd always felt like Tanya had gotten the lucky breaks, was susceptible to being taken. They didn't sleep together at first. They just spent time together. They went to look at flowers. They went to taste cakes. They talked. And slowly, Devin began to make Brittany feel special in a way that no one had ever made her feel special before. He told her she was beautiful. He told her she was important. He told her that being with her made him feel alive in a way he'd never felt before. Brittany, starving for attention, for love, for someone to believe in her, fell for it completely. 3 months before the wedding, they slept together for the first time. Devin didn't sleep that night. He lay in his apartment in Chelsea, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what he was about to do. He was going to destroy his engagement. He was going to humiliate his fiancée in front of 200 people. He was going to betray his soon-to-be sister-in-law. And he was going to feel alive doing it. That's what Devin didn't understand about himself. He wasn't in love with Brittany. He was in love with the chaos. He was in love with the betrayal. He was in love with the feeling of taking something that wasn't his and proving that he could have it. Alexander called him that night, around 2 a.m. "What are you doing awake?" Alexander asked. He was in San Francisco, but he'd driven over to be at the wedding. He was staying at the Plaza Hotel. "Can't sleep," Devin said. "Cold feet?" Alexander asked, and there was something in his voice that suggested he already knew something was wrong. "Something like that," Devin said. "Devin, listen to me," Alexander said, and his voice was serious in a way that Devin had rarely heard. "Whatever you're thinking about doing tomorrow, don't do it. This woman, Tanya, she's a good person. She doesn't deserve whatever you're about to pull." Devin's heart stopped. "How do you?" "I've known you your whole life," Alexander said. "I know exactly what you're like. I know what you're capable of. And I'm begging you as your brother, don't do this." "I have to," Devin said quietly. "No, you don't. You have a choice. You always have a choice." But Devin hung up the phone. Because the truth was, he didn't feel like he had a choice. He felt like he was being pulled toward the destruction like gravity, like it was inevitable, like this was just who he was. Tanya woke up at 5 a.m. on the morning of her wedding. She lay in the guest room of the Plaza Hotel, unable to sleep anymore. She was excited. She was nervous. She was ready. She got up and took a long shower. She did her skincare routine. She called her mother. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Patricia said over the phone. "You're about to marry such a good man. You two are going to be so happy." Tanya wanted to tell her mother that she was scared. She wanted to tell her that she'd had a weird feeling for the last few weeks, like something was off. But she didn't. She pushed down the fear and focused on the happiness. Brittany arrived at 7 a.m. to help her get ready. Brittany's eyes were red. She'd been crying. "Are you okay?" Tanya asked. Just emotional, Brittany said, avoiding eye contact. My sister's getting married, big day. Brittany did Tanya's hair. She curled it into loose waves. She did Tanya's makeup, doing her eyes so perfectly that when Tanya looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. She looked like a bride. She looked like someone who was about to start a new chapter of her life. At 11 a.m., there was a knock on the bridal suite door. Keisha opened it. Keisha's face went pale. Tanya, she said quietly, you need to come to the hallway. Tanya stood up, still in her dress, and walked to the door. The hallway outside, the bridal suite was quiet, except for the sound of two people crying. Devin and Brittany stood together, holding hands, looking absolutely miserable. I'm so sorry, Brittany said immediately, seeing Tanya. Tanya, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I fell in love with him, and he said he loved me too, and we couldn't hide it anymore. We had to tell you before you got married. Tanya stared at them. She couldn't process what was happening. This had to be some kind of joke. This had to be some kind of prank. But it wasn't. She could see it in their faces, in the way Devin wouldn't look at her, in the way Brittany was crying, in the way they were standing together, a unit, a couple. How long? Tanya heard herself ask from very far away. 3 months, Devin said quietly. The world went black. Tanya doesn't remember much of what happened next. She remembers Keisha holding her while she screamed. She remembers her mother arriving and looking like her heart had been shattered all over again, reliving her own losses. She remembers the phone calls to the vendor, canceling the catering, canceling the flowers, canceling the photographer. She remembers 200 guests going home confused, disappointed, wondering what had happened. She remembers the walk of shame out of the Plaza Hotel later that night, still in her wedding dress because she couldn't figure out how to take it off, couldn't figure out how to move, couldn't figure out how to exist in a world where her sister and her fiancé had betrayed her in the most devastating way possible. She remembers thinking that she would never recover from this, that she would never trust anyone again, that her life was over. She was 28 years old, and she was certain that she would never love anyone again. She was certain that no one could ever hurt her the way Devin and Brittany had just hurt her. What she didn't know was that the pain was just beginning. What she didn't know was that the real story hadn't even started yet. It's been exactly 10 years. Tanya is standing in the executive conference room on the 40th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, presenting a branding campaign to a room full of tech executives. She's 38 years old now. She's successful. She's accomplished. She's built a design firm that's known throughout New York City as one of the best in the business. She doesn't think about Devin anymore. She barely remembers his face. But Brittany is a different story. She's been following Brittany's life for years, not out of spite, but out of a need to understand. Brittany married Devin exactly 1 year after the wedding disaster. They had one daughter, but 3 years into the marriage, Devin left Brittany for another woman. Then he left that woman for another woman. Then he left her for another. Devin went through 4 more marriages in the space of 10 years. He burned through his trust fund money. He became a cautionary tale about what happens when you're wealthy and empty inside. Brittany, on the other hand, had actually grown up. She'd gone back to school. She'd gotten her degree in social work. She was helping people now, making a real difference. She was raising her daughter, paying her own bills, building a real life. Tanya had even forgiven her, eventually. Not because what Brittany had done was okay. It wasn't. But because Tanya had realized that holding onto the anger was only hurting herself. She'd spent the last 10 years building something beautiful. She'd created a design firm that employed 30 people. She'd designed for major companies. She'd won awards. She'd been featured in design magazines. She'd traveled the world. She'd built a life that didn't need a man to be complete. She was happy, truly happy in a way that she hadn't thought was possible. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change again. What she didn't know was that she was about to meet the one person who could actually match her energy, her ambition, her drive. What she didn't know was that she was about to meet Alexander Washington. And she definitely didn't know that she was going to marry him. The conference room was full of intimidating people in expensive suits, making important decisions about technology and the future. Tanya was used to being the only woman in rooms like this. She was used to being underestimated. She was used to proving everyone wrong. The door opened, and a man walked in that she'd never seen before. He was tall. He had dark skin and intelligent eyes. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent. And when he looked at Tanya, something shifted in her chest. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sitting down at the head of the table. Traffic on the FDR was insane. "Alexander Washington," the company's CEO said, introducing him. "Everyone, this is Alexander Washington. His company, Nexus Tech Solutions, is one of the leading software platforms in the world. He's here to discuss a potential partnership on a new project." Alexander extended his hand to shake hands with everyone in the room. When he got to Tanya, he paused. "I'm Alexander," he said, and his handshake was warm and firm. "And you are?" "Tanya Richardson," she said. "I'm the creative director here. I'll be leading the design aspects of this partnership." "Richardson," Alexander repeated, and something flickered across his face. "That's a beautiful name." He held her hand for just a moment longer than was professional. Tanya felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't felt attraction like this in 10 years. She'd dated a little over the past decade, but nothing serious. She'd been too focused on her work. But something about this man made her want to focus on something else. Throughout the meeting, she couldn't stop looking at him. She noticed the way he thought through problems, the way he asked intelligent questions, the way he seemed to actually care about doing things the right way, not just the profitable way. When the meeting ended, he asked if he could take her out for coffee. "I want to talk more about your vision for this project," he said. "Your ideas are really compelling." She said yes before she could overthink it. They went to a small coffee shop near the office. Alexander ordered black coffee. Tanya ordered her usual oat milk latte. "So tell me," Alexander said, leaning forward, "how did a brilliant designer end up in the corporate world? How did a billionaire tech entrepreneur end up meeting with a random design firm?" Tanya countered. Alexander smiled. "Fair point. I actually chose your firm specifically. I'd seen some of your work. I was impressed." "You're lying," Tanya said, but she was smiling. "You didn't know I existed until today." "Okay, you got me," Alexander said, and there was something so genuine in his laugh. "I didn't know who you were specifically, but when I walked into that room and saw you and then heard your ideas, I knew I wanted to work with you." They talked for 3 hours, about design, about technology, about what it meant to build something that mattered, about their families, about their past. Tanya told him about growing up in Queens, about her mother being a nurse, about having to take care of her sister. Alexander told her about growing up wealthy, about feeling trapped by expectations, about how he'd literally run away from his family to build something on his own. "My father died when I was 14, he said. "My mother kind of checked out after that. She's still alive, but she's just not really present. And my brother, my younger brother, he was always the sensitive one, the one who needed support. So I just became the one who had to be successful, the one who had to prove that we were worth something." "That's a lot of pressure," Tanya said. "It was," Alexander agreed. "But I think it made me who I am. I don't know how to exist without pushing myself toward the next goal, the next achievement, the next challenge." "So you're saying you're a workaholic?" Tanya asked, smiling. "Completely. And I have terrible luck with relationships because of it. Women get tired of competing with my company for my attention." "That's because you're dating the wrong women," Tanya said, and then immediately regretted saying it. But Alexander didn't look away. He held her gaze. "Maybe I am," he said softly. "Maybe I need to find a woman who's not competing with me. Maybe I need to find a woman who's building something too, someone who understands that drive, that need to create something that matters. The coffee date became dinner. Dinner became a walk through Central Park. The walk became more conversations, more laughs, more of that electric feeling that Tanya had thought was dead inside her. By the time Alexander walked her home to her apartment in the Upper West Side, Tanya was certain of one thing. She was about to fall in love with this man. And she was terrified. 2 weeks into dating Alexander, Tanya found out who he was. She was at dinner with Keisha, her best friend, and Keisha asked her where she was going after dinner. "I'm meeting Alexander," Tanya said, smiling in that way she did now when she thought about him. "Alexander Washington?" Keisha asked, and her voice sounded strange. "Yes, how do you know his name?" "Tanya," Keisha said slowly, "do you know who his brother is?" Tanya's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "His brother is Devin Washington, the same Devin you were supposed to marry 10 years ago." The room went dark. Tanya couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. All she could hear was the blood pounding in her ears. "Are you sure?" she asked, but she already knew Keisha was sure. "I looked him up," Keisha said. "When you first mentioned Alexander, I wanted to make sure he wasn't some creep, and I found out he's the older brother of Devin Washington, who you were engaged to, who left you at the altar with your sister." Tanya left the restaurant immediately. She didn't call Alexander. She didn't text him. She just went home and cried. How could the universe be this cruel? How could she finally open her heart to someone, only to find out that he was connected to the worst day of her life? What if he knew? What if this was some kind of setup? What if he was playing her? She had to ask him. Alexander came to her apartment that night, uninvited. He knew something was wrong. Tanya opened the door and just stared at him. "What's going on?" he asked. "You disappeared from dinner. You won't answer my calls. What happened?" "Who is Devin Washington?" Tanya asked. Alexander's face went completely white. "How do you?" he started. "Is he your brother?" "Yes," Alexander said quietly. "But Tanya, I can explain." "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "Do you know what he did to me?" "I know exactly who you are," Alexander said, and his voice was shaking. "I've known since the moment you told me your name, and I've been losing sleep trying to figure out how to tell you this without destroying what we have." "You knew," Tanya felt the anger rise in her chest. "You knew the whole time and you didn't tell me." "I knew that Devin had been engaged to someone named Tanya Richardson 10 years ago. I knew that something happened at the wedding. I didn't know all the details until I started researching because I knew you looked familiar, and then when I found out who you were. Tanya, I should have told you immediately. I know that. But I was scared." "Scared of what?" Tanya demanded. "Scared that you would hate me because of what my brother did. Scared that you would think I was somehow connected to his betrayal. Scared that I would lose you before I even had you." "You should have told me the truth," Tanya said, her voice breaking. "You should have been honest from the beginning." "I know," Alexander said, "and I'm sorry, but you have to believe me when I tell you that my feelings for you have nothing to do with Devin. My feelings for you are real. This is real." Tanya wanted to believe him, but after everything she'd been through, how could she? Tanya stood in her living room, arms crossed, waiting for Alexander to explain himself. "Sit down," she said finally. Alexander sat on her couch. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About me, about Devin, about everything." "I'm listening," Tanya said, standing because she needed to feel like she had power in this conversation. "Devin and I have never been close," Alexander began. "Our father died when I was 18 and Devin was only 14. After that, everything fell apart. Our mother checked out emotionally. Our father's business had problems, and I had to step up. I had to become the adult in a house with a grieving mother and a traumatized younger brother." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "By the time I was 22, I was done. I couldn't be my brother's therapist anymore. I couldn't save my mother. I couldn't fix our family, so I left. I moved out to San Francisco. I started a company. I poured everything I had into building something. Okay, Tanya said, still standing. My company became successful, very successful. By the time I was 30, I'd already made my first billion. I could have come back to help my family. I could have done a lot of things, but I didn't, because I was hurt, because I felt like nobody understood the weight of what I'd been carrying, so I cut myself off from them. Alexander looked up at Tanya. Devin was struggling. He'd always struggled. My mother enabled him. She let him live off the trust fund money. She never made him get a real job or build anything real. So he just became this guy who was wealthy and empty inside. He looked for meaning in the wrong places. He started seeking validation from women. He became obsessed with taking things that other people valued. How do you know all of this about him? Tanya asked. Because I finally started paying attention, Alexander said. When I heard you were his fiancée, something clicked. I realized that my brother was the same pattern. He was going to hurt you because that's what he does. He hurts people. And instead of warning you, instead of helping you, I was too proud and too angry to reach out. You knew he was going to hurt me and you didn't warn me, Tanya asked, her voice rising. I didn't know for certain, Alexander said, standing up now. I suspected, and I was in San Francisco building my company. I was making excuses. I was telling myself it wasn't my responsibility to manage my brother's behavior. But the truth is, I should have reached out to you. I should have found you and told you everything. Tanya felt tears starting. So for 10 years you've known about me. You've known about what Devin did. Yes, Alexander said quietly. I've known that my brother destroyed someone's wedding. I've known that he betrayed you with your own sister, and I've felt ashamed of him every single day since it happened, and I've felt ashamed of myself for not doing anything about it. Why are you telling me this now? Tanya asked. Because I met you, Alexander said, and the moment I met you, I knew you were the Tanya, and I couldn't move forward with this with us without being honest about what I knew and when I knew it. Tanya sank onto a chair. I don't know if I can do this. I know, Alexander said. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I don't expect you to trust me, but I'm asking you to give me the chance to earn your trust. How am I supposed to do that? Tanya asked. You're connected to the worst day of my life. Every time I look at you, I'm going to think about Devin, about Brittany, about that day. I know, Alexander repeated, and I'm sorry. But Tanya, what I feel for you isn't connected to any of that. It's not complicated, it's simple. I see you, I respect you, I'm attracted to you, and I want to know you. Tanya wanted to send him away. She wanted to protect herself. But she also recognized that Alexander was doing something that Devin never had. He was being honest. I need time, she said finally. Take all the time you need, Alexander said. But he didn't leave. He sat with her. He answered every question she asked about Devin, about his family, about his childhood. He was unflinchingly honest. And slowly, Tanya started to see something she didn't expect. She started to see a good man who'd made a mistake in not reaching out sooner. Tanya and Alexander had been taking things slowly. They weren't officially dating, but they weren't not dating either. They saw each other for coffee. They sent texts. They had dinner occasionally. And slowly, the walls around Tanya's heart started to come down. One afternoon, Alexander met Tanya at her design studio in Brooklyn. It was a beautiful space with exposed brick, large windows, and a team of talented young designers working on various projects. Alexander looked around with genuine interest. This is incredible, he said. You built this. I did, Tanya said, and she felt a surge of pride. It took me 5 years after the wedding before I felt ready to start my own business. But once I did, it was the best decision I ever made. I can tell, Alexander said. This is a reflection of who you are. It's creative and organized and thoughtful. It's perfect. One of her designers, a young woman named Sophia, came over with a question about a project. Tanya introduced her to Alexander. "Oh my God," Sophia said, her eyes wide. "You're Alexander Washington from Nexus Tech." "Guilty," Alexander said, smiling. "I wanted to work at your company," Sophia said, "but it's incredibly hard to get hired there. You're one of the smartest tech people in the world." After Sophia walked away, Tanya shook her head. "You're famous," she said. "I forgot that sometimes." "I'm not interested in famous," Alexander said. "I'm interested in you." 6 months after they met, Alexander took Tanya to his penthouse apartment for the first time. It was on the top floor of a building in Tribeca. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire Manhattan skyline. The apartment was minimalist and elegant, all clean lines and expensive art. "This is where you live?" Tanya asked. "When I'm in New York," Alexander said. "I also have places in San Francisco and London, but New York is where I want to be now." "Why?" Tanya asked. "Because you're here," he said simply. They made love that night. It was tender and passionate and completely real. Afterward, they lay in bed together, and Tanya felt something settle inside her that had been restless for 10 years. "I love you," she heard herself say. Alexander pulled her closer. "I love you too. I have since the moment I saw you in that conference room." 2 weeks after their first night together, Tanya got a phone call. It was Brittany. "Hi," Brittany said nervously. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I needed to tell you something. Devin found out that you're dating Alexander." Tanya's heart started racing. "How did he find out?" "He has Google alerts on your name," Brittany said quietly. "He saw something about you at a charity event with Alexander, and now he's very upset." "What do you mean upset?" Tanya asked. "He's saying that Alexander is trying to manipulate you. He's saying that Alexander set the whole thing up. He's saying that Alexander is using you to hurt him." "That's insane," Tanya said. "I know," Brittany said, "but Devin is. He's not well, Tanya. I realized that too late, but he's not well. He's been through 4 marriages now. He's been arrested twice for fraud. His life is falling apart, and I think he's starting to blame everyone around him for his problems." After they hung up, Tanya told Alexander what Brittany had said. Alexander's response was calm and measured. "I expected that," he said. "Devin's entire identity is based on being a victim of circumstances. When he sees me happy with you, he can't stand it. He has to try to poison it. That's what he does." "Do you think he'll try to do something?" Tanya asked. "I think he'll try," Alexander said. "But it won't work, because our relationship isn't based on deception or obsession or taking things that don't belong to us. It's based on trust and honesty and actually caring about each other." 1 year after they met at the conference, Alexander took Tanya to the roof of his building. It was a clear night. The lights of Manhattan spread out below them like a constellation. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you," Alexander said, getting down on one knee. "I want to build something with you that's bigger than any company I could ever create. I want to build a life. I want you to be my wife." He pulled out a ring. It was a 5-carat diamond, but it wasn't ostentatious. It was elegant and timeless. "Will you marry me?" Tanya said yes. They decided on an intimate wedding. 50 people. A garden in the Hamptons. Something real and meaningful, the opposite of what the first wedding was supposed to be. Brittany called Tanya to ask if she could come. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important," Brittany said, "but I think I need to be there. And I think you need me to be there too, for you to see that I'm not that person anymore." Tanya thought about it, and then she said yes. Because 10 years had passed, and Tanya had learned that carrying anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So Brittany was invited to the wedding. Devin was not. 2 weeks before the wedding, Alexander told Tanya something she didn't know. They were having dinner in his penthouse, and he seemed nervous. "I need to tell you about my money," he said. "Okay," Tanya said. She wasn't worried. She'd already decided she didn't care about his money. She cared about him. When I sold Nexus Tech, I made $3.2 billion, Alexander said. That was 7 years ago. Since then, I've made more money through investments and other ventures. Okay, Tanya said, not sure where this was going. I've also given away about $1 billion, he continued, to various causes, to nonprofits, to foundations, to people who needed help. That's amazing, Tanya said. I did it partly because it felt like the right thing to do, Alexander said. But I also did it partly because I felt like I needed to be punished. Because I felt like I didn't deserve all that money when I hadn't earned it the way I thought I had. What do you mean? Tanya asked. I mean that my father gave me a significant head start. He gave me access to education and connections that most people don't have. He gave me a trust fund to fall back on. And yes, I worked hard. But I also had advantages. And for a long time, I couldn't accept that. I thought I had to prove that I was better than everyone else, that I had built everything from scratch. And now, Tanya asked, now I'm trying to be honest about my advantages. Now I'm trying to use my money to help other people. And now I'm trying to not define my worth by how much money I have or how successful my company is. Tanya smiled. I think that's really healthy. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I'm not trying to use my money to impress you or control you, Alexander said. I want you to know who I really am, flawed, trying to be better, working toward redemption for the ways I've failed in the past. Tanya kissed him. I already know who you are, and I love that person. The garden in the Hamptons was perfect. Roses blooming, the ocean in the distance, small white chairs for the 50 guests who had gathered to witness their love. Tanya wore a simple white dress, not a ball gown, not elaborate, just elegant and beautiful. Alexander wore a white linen suit. He looked like he was made of light and goodness. Patricia walked Tanya down the aisle and cried happy tears. Keisha was her bridesmaid. Alexander's mother was a guest, his cousins, his friends, people who loved him. And Brittany sat in the second row, tears streaming down her face, genuinely happy for her sister. When Alexander and Tanya said their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. I promise to love you honestly, Alexander said, to never hide who I am or what I'm feeling. I promise to support your dreams and lift you up when you fall. I promise to spend the rest of my life earning your trust every single day. I promise to believe in you, Tanya said, to see the good in you even when you can't see it in yourself. I promise to build a life with you that's real and true and ours. I promise to never stop believing in second chances for you, for me, for anyone who's willing to do the work. They kissed as a married couple. The garden erupted in cheers. And for the first time since that day 10 years ago when the worst thing in the world happened, Tanya felt completely, perfectly safe. Tanya and Alexander are sitting on the terrace of their home in the Hamptons, watching the ocean. It's now been 11 years since Tanya's failed wedding day. Exactly 1 year ago, at the 10-year mark, they got married. Alexander's company has continued to grow, but he stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on his foundation, which gives grants to young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. Tanya's design studio has expanded to 3 locations: New York, Los Angeles, and London. She's won every major design award there is. She's featured in design magazines as one of the most innovative thinkers in the industry. But the thing that makes them happiest has nothing to do with work. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we'd never met? Tanya asks. Every day, Alexander says. I think about how broken I was, how empty I felt even with all the success and money. And then I met you, and suddenly I had a reason to be better. Suddenly I had something real to work toward. I was so angry at you, Tanya says. When I found out you were Devin's brother, I thought the universe was punishing me. And now, Alexander asks. Now I think maybe the universe was giving me a gift, Tanya says. Maybe it took 10 years and a whole lot of pain, but I got exactly what I needed. They sit in silence, watching the sun set over the ocean. And Alexander thinks about his brother. Devon is still out there, still hurting people, still empty inside, still looking for meaning in all the wrong places. But Alexander has made peace with the fact that he can't save Devon. He can only save himself. He can only build a good life. He can only love Tanya with everything he has. He can only try to be better. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Tanya and Alexander were in bed, reading. It was a normal, quiet evening. The kind of evening they cherished because Alexander's work as a billionaire entrepreneur was exhausting. Alexander's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, like he knew what was about to happen. "I have to take this," he said. He went into the living room and closed the door. Tanya couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could hear the anger in his voice. When he came back to the bedroom 40 minutes later, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "I need to tell you something," Alexander said, "and I need you to listen to the entire story before you react. Can you do that?" Tanya's heart started racing. Of course. Alexander sat on the edge of the bed. "Devon's in jail. He's been arrested for multiple counts of fraud. The police called me because I'm listed as his emergency contact. They're saying he embezzled over $10 million from a company over the course of 5 years. "Oh my God," Tanya said. Is he okay?" "Physically, yes," Alexander said. "But Tanya, that's not the whole story." "What do you mean?" Tanya asked. "That phone call I just got. It wasn't just the police. It was also a reporter from the New York Times. They're doing an investigation into Devon's financial crimes, and they've dug up some information that implicates me." Tanya felt her stomach drop. "What information?" Alexander took a deep breath. "When my father died," he began, "he left his business to our mother, but there were financial problems, serious problems. Our father had made some bad investments and the company was hemorrhaging money. My mother couldn't handle it. She was too depressed, so I stepped in. I was 18 years old and I basically took over managing the family's finances." "Okay," Tanya said slowly. "When I was 20, I decided to liquidate the company. I sold off the assets. I tried to make the best of a bad situation. But there was one problem. I had to use some of the trust fund money to pay off my father's debts. The trust fund that was supposed to go to Devon." Tanya felt her eyes widen. "So I took about $2 million from Devon's trust fund to save our family's financial situation, without telling him, without asking permission." "Alexander," Tanya said. "I've been paying it back slowly over the years," he continued. "I've given him money through various investments and deals that he didn't know about, but the reporter found evidence of this arrangement. And she's saying that I've been manipulating family assets and that I used Devon's trust fund to bootstrap my own company." "Is that true?" Tanya asked. "Did you use his trust fund to start Nexus?" "Partially," Alexander admitted. "I used part of the $2 million to start my company. Then I reinvested the profits and paid it back with interest. But technically, yes, I used Devon's money without his permission." Tanya got out of bed. She started packing. "How long have you known about this?" she asked. "I've always known," Alexander said. "But the New York Times reporter called to say that she's running a story tomorrow morning, and she's framing it as tech billionaire Alexander Washington stole millions from his brother's trust fund. New investigation reveals." "Oh God," Tanya said. "And there's more," Alexander continued. "The reporter has found out that I was aware of Devon's affair with your sister before the wedding. The police have records of a phone call I made to Devon the night before your wedding. I was trying to convince him not to go through with the betrayal. I was trying to warn him, but I was doing it as a brother trying to save him from himself, not as someone trying to save you." Tanya stopped packing. She looked at Alexander. "You knew?" she asked, her voice very small. "I suspected," Alexander said. "And the night before your wedding I called him and told him what I suspected. I told him not to do it. I told him you didn't deserve that, but I didn't call you. I didn't reach out to you. I didn't do the thing that would have actually saved you from the pain." "Why not?" Tanya asked. "Because I didn't think it was my place," Alexander said. "Because I was avoiding my family. Because I was a coward. Because I was more focused on my own life than on helping someone I didn't even know yet." Tanya sat back on the bed. She felt like she couldn't breathe. "So the New York Times is going to print a story saying that you stole millions from your brother, and that same brother destroyed my wedding, and nobody's going to care about the context or the reasons why. They're just going to see, billionaire steals from family." "Yes," Alexander said quietly. "And everyone's going to hate you." "Probably," Alexander said. "And everyone's going to think that I married you for your money." "That's going to happen too," Alexander said. Tanya stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the Manhattan skyline. All those people down there, living their lives, not knowing that her world was about to explode again. "I need to think," she said. I need to not be here right now." The New York Times story was brutal. "Tech billionaire accused of stealing millions from brother's trust fund" was the headline. The article detailed everything: how Alexander had taken money from Devon's trust fund without permission, how he'd used it to start his company, how he'd later tried to repay it through various complicated financial arrangements, how he'd known about Devon's infidelity before Tanya's wedding but hadn't warned her. Within hours, the story was everywhere. CNBC reported on it. Bloomberg reported on it. Twitter exploded with people criticizing Alexander. And then came the worst part. People started digging into Tanya and Alexander's relationship. Did billionaire tech CEO manipulate woman into marriage? One headline asked. Woman whose wedding was destroyed by Alexander Washington's brother marries Alexander years later. Coincidence or calculated revenge? Asked another. Tanya's phone rang constantly. Reporters asking for statements. Friends asking if she was okay. Her mother asking what was happening. For the first time in her married life, Tanya felt like she couldn't trust anything about their relationship. What if Alexander had pursued her specifically because she was Devon's ex-fiancée? What if this was all some kind of elaborate plan? She stayed at a hotel for 3 days while she thought about what to do. Alexander came to the hotel on the 4th day. Tanya almost didn't let him in. But she did. "I owe you an apology," Alexander said immediately. "Actually, I owe you several apologies. For not being honest about the trust fund situation, for not reaching out before your wedding, for not preparing you for what the media was going to do with our relationship." "Did you pursue me on purpose?" Tanya asked. "Because I was Devon's ex-fiancée, because you wanted to hurt him?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "I met you in that conference room and I was attracted to you because of you, not because of Devon, not because of the past, because of who you are right now. That connection was real. My feelings are real." "But you knew about me before that," Tanya said. "You knew about the wedding. You could have reached out years ago." "I could have," Alexander agreed. "And I've thought about that every single day since I realized who you were. I should have called you. I should have explained Devon's psychology. I should have warned you. But I didn't. And I've had to live with that regret." "Why didn't you?" Tanya asked. "Because I was selfish," Alexander said. "Because I was focused on my company. Because I was telling myself that it wasn't my responsibility to manage my brother's behavior or warn his fiancée. Because I was being a coward and justifying it as having boundaries." Tanya sat down on the hotel bed. "What about the trust fund money?" she asked. "I stole it," Alexander said. "Let me be really clear about that. I took Devon's money without permission. Yes, I was trying to save our family. Yes, I paid it back with interest. But technically and legally and morally, I stole from my brother." "Why are you telling me this now?" Tanya asked. "Why not just spin it and let your lawyers handle it?" "Because I promised you honesty," Alexander said. "Because I want you to know exactly what I've done and exactly who I am. Because I love you more than I care about my reputation." Tanya looked at him for a long time. I need to know something, she said finally. If I asked you to walk away, if I asked you to end the marriage and disappear from my life, would you do it? Alexander was quiet for a moment. I would do it, he said, not because it's what I want, but because I love you more than I want to keep you. And if being with me is hurting you, then the right thing to do is to let you go. Something shifted in Tanya in that moment, because she realized that what Alexander was offering was the one thing she'd never had before, a man who was willing to lose her in order to keep her safe, a man who was willing to put her needs above his own, a man who was being honest. I don't want you to leave, she said quietly. Tanya did something that nobody expected. She went on the Today Show. She sat down with the host and she told her story, the whole story. 10 years ago, she said, my sister and my fiancé betrayed me. It was the worst day of my life. I spent the next 10 years rebuilding myself, and then I met Alexander Washington. She talked about meeting him at the conference. She talked about the moment she realized he was Devon's brother. She talked about his honesty about not warning her before the wedding. He was wrong, Tanya said clearly. He should have reached out. He should have warned me. He knows that, I know that, and he's had to live with that regret for 10 years. Then she talked about the trust fund money. Alexander's family was in financial crisis. His father had died. His mother was grieving. And when Alexander was 18 years old, he made the choice to use his brother's trust fund to save his family from financial ruin. Was that wrong? Technically, yes. He didn't have permission. But was he trying to help people he loved? Also, yes. The media wants to paint this as billionaire steals from family and then manipulates woman into marriage, Tanya continued. But that's not the story. The story is about a man who made mistakes when he was young and then spent his entire life trying to make amends for those mistakes. The story is about a woman who was hurt and then chose to give love another chance, even when it was terrifying. So you're staying with him? The host asked. Yes, Tanya said simply, because he's honest, because he's trying to be better, because he loves me, and because I love him. Devon ended up serving 4 years in federal prison for his financial crimes. But before he went in, something unexpected happened. He called Tanya. I wanted to apologize, he said, his voice small and broken, for what I did, for hurting you, for hurting my brother, for hurting my ex-wife, for basically hurting everyone I've ever been with. Are you apologizing because you're genuinely sorry? Tanya asked. Or are you apologizing because you know you're going to prison? Maybe both, Devon said, but I think I'm finally starting to understand that I've been sick, like actually mentally ill. I've been obsessed with things I can't have, and I've destroyed things that were good in my life in order to chase that obsession, and I've hurt innocent people in the process. Are you getting help? Tanya asked. I'm going to prison, Devon said. They have counseling programs there. I'm going to use them. And maybe when I get out, I can actually try to be a good person. Tanya didn't respond immediately. I forgive you, she said finally. Not because what you did was okay, but because I can't spend any more energy on hate. I've spent enough time on that. When she hung up the phone, she felt lighter. Tanya and Alexander's marriage survived the scandal. More than survived, they actually became stronger. Alexander's company weathered the reputation damage. Once people understood the context, once they understood that he'd taken his brother's money to save his family and had spent years paying it back, the narrative changed. He became a symbol of someone willing to be honest about his mistakes and work to correct them. He ended up giving a TED Talk about family, forgiveness, and redemption that went viral. Tanya's design studio won the prestigious Gold Award for Best Design Firm. She was featured in a documentary about women entrepreneurs who'd overcome adversity. Brittany, who had also faced media scrutiny because of her past, ended up using the attention to launch a nonprofit focused on helping women recover from destructive relationships. She became an advocate for mental health awareness and family healing. And Tanya and Alexander. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn. They renovated it together, creating a beautiful space that reflected both of their aesthetics. They hosted dinners where friends came and laughed and talked about their lives. They also started a foundation together, the Foundation for Second Chances. It provided funding and support for people trying to rebuild their lives after betrayal, loss, or failure. One evening, Tanya and Alexander were sitting on their rooftop garden, watching the sunset over Brooklyn. "Do you ever regret it?" Tanya asked. "Coming back to New York, pursuing me, being honest about everything." "Not for a second," Alexander said, pulling her close. "Because even though it was terrifying and difficult and painful, it was real, and real is always better than easy." "I used to think I'd never trust anyone again," Tanya said. "After Devin and Brittany, I thought that part of me was broken forever." "And now?" Alexander asked. "Now I think that pain was just me learning how to be strong," Tanya said. "And then you came along, and I learned how to be strong with someone else. That's even better." Moral of this story. This story began with a betrayal. It began with a sister who stole her sister's fiancé. It began with heartbreak and devastation, and a woman whose entire world fell apart. But that's not really where the story was going, because pain is never the end of a story. It's always the beginning. The real story is about what happened after the betrayal. It's about a woman who chose to rebuild herself instead of wallow in her pain. It's about a man who chose to be honest about his mistakes instead of hiding from them. It's about two people who had every reason to distrust each other but chose love anyway. The lesson is this: betrayal is devastating, but it's not permanent. Healing is possible. Love is possible. Redemption is possible. But here's the important part. It only happens if you're willing to be honest, if you're willing to admit your mistakes, if you're willing to do the work. Devin never got there. Devin spent his life chasing obsessions and hurting people because he was too proud to admit that he was broken, and he paid the price for that. But Tanya and Alexander chose differently. They chose honesty. They chose vulnerability. They chose to do the hard work. And that choice, that simple, terrifying choice to be real with each other, that's what changed everything. So here's my question for you. What are you hiding? What truth are you avoiding saying? What mistake are you too proud to admit? Because I promise you, the moment you choose honesty over ego, the moment you choose vulnerability over protection, that's when real transformation happens. That's when real love becomes possible. Don't be Devin. Don't spend your life chasing obsessions and hurting people and running from the truth about who you are. Be Tanya, be Alexander. Be someone willing to look at the worst moments of your life and say, "This happened, but it doesn't define me. I'm going to be better." That's the real story. That's the real lesson. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something, please share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear about forgiveness. Share it with someone who needs to know that it's possible to rebuild after betrayal. Share it with someone who needs to understand that honesty is always better than lies. And if you're struggling with trust after being hurt, if you're trying to figure out if you can love again, know this: you can. It's just going to require you to be brave. It's going to require you to be honest. It's going to require you to believe that you deserve something real. You do. Now go build that life. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about real people overcoming real challenges. Hit the bell so you don't miss new videos. And comment below, what's the lie you're telling yourself that you need to stop telling? Until next time, be brave, be real.